Christopher Mitchell. I'm 22 years old and I'm from Portland, Maine. So I'm combining my sculpture with my ceramics by making sculptural ceramics. So I take objects that I find from thrift shops and other various sorts of places like 3D printing and just things I found objects from life, and I recreate them through a process of mold making, plaster mold making, and I use a certain type of clay called slip, and I use a process called slipcasting, and I recreate them into ceramics. The hardest part is that it's all about timing. It's all about when you decide to pour into the molds and when you bust them out, and just making sure it's all about timing. It takes a while and takes patience. It's not always easy to build with. When I create my objects, I often can sometimes, if you go too big or it weighs too much or different things that can break. I have the molds ready. I have to prep the molds. I have to make sure that they don't leak, or if they do leak, I have to clog them and make sure it's all ready to go. I have them all lined up, and then I just go one by one. I pour it till it's full, and I pour them all. But while that's happening, the moisture is being sucked out of the clay, and it's being sucked into the plaster. So oftentimes it'll get sucked down the clay. So you have to top them off. I just wait an hour is a good time for me. It depends on the humidity, the type of day. And then I go slowly one by one and dumping them all out. You have to be slow. You can't thrash them around and you can't jiggle them all out because then it will mess up the inside product. So you have to slowly let it drain out one by one by one by one. And then then I let them sit again for about 6, 7, 8 hours depending on the humidity of the day before I can break them out of the molds. So breaking them out of the molds can also be dangerous because you have to make sure that they're ready. You have a certain consistency of the clay where you still want to be able to manipulate it and play with it and have it move, but you don't want to break it or make a crack into it, or you have to be very careful. From that, I slowly break out the molds and have them clean up the sides of the lines where often you can see how like the puzzle of the molds break out. Often make my pieces, I make like 5 pieces at once because it's just, you only have a certain window of it's like hard but not hard enough, and you'll still be able to manipulate it and play with it. Always I keep in mind the difficulty of the mold I'm making. So when you make a mold, it's much easier to make something that's like a circular object than it is to have something really complex with a lot of holes and a lot of stuff. And the hardest part about ceramics is that you have 3 times to mess up a piece. You have to first create the piece, then you have to go through the whole first stage of building it, and then you have to have it survive the first bisque firing. And then after the bisque firing, you have to use the glaze in the underglaze in certain ways, and then you don't know how it's going to come out of the kiln. So at any moment through the process, you could break your piece or ruin your piece by making the wrong decision. I get most of my stuff at Puggies. They're great. They're awesome. And then I also go to a Moore thrift shop. I also go to the antique store. I think it's on my way to Troy. And then when I'm in Troy, I go to the Red Barn, I believe, or the Big Red Barn. They have just all different types of knickknacks, antiques, figurines, dolls, and also the imagery that's there.
So he's taking all this stuff that we recognize, like, you know, maybe your mom had a Holly Hobby thing on in the bathroom for years, and all of a sudden Chris took it, and now all of a sudden it's, you know, the head's cut off and put like that. It's pretty great. He's taking all these old objects from, you know, Goodwill stores and stuff, and he's made the molds. Some of them are really difficult molds. He's made a lot of them, so he has a lot of things he can play with. A lot of images he can reuse, cut up, slice and dice, put them all back together. He has enough molds in there with information to keep him going for years, really.